Okay, we're going to do a book review of a great book I just finished a couple days ago called Loving What Is by Byron Katie. Really enjoyed this book. Definitely top five, maybe top 10 in terms of this world. So go through some of the takeaways that I had and hope you enjoy it. So I'd say the biggest thing that Byron talks about is facts and stories, and in her mind, pain is inevitable, right? We're going to get hurt some regard, physically at some point in our life, but really suffering is a choice, and suffering comes from the attachment to the story that may or may not be true. And so our minds need to attach to a story of a fact that happened, and our ego gets in the way, and our mind runs crazy, and a lot of our suffering is, in her world, in her mind, a choice because we're choosing to attach meaning to the stories that we believe about a certain fact that happens. And a thought is harmless unless we believe it, is what she says. And so the left brain is trying to convince ourselves that it's in control and we need to keep our personal narrative together. Otherwise, we have some issues. And so we encourage ourselves to lie to ourselves to get through that. One of the things that I find interesting is if you look at the cover of the Wall Street Journal and the market moves, it'll say the market went down 2% today, and they'll make up two or three different reasons as to why that happened. The reality is no one knows why a market went up or down, and there's a million different factors that go into the way markets move. So when the Fed does something, we ascribe value to that and say the market went up 2% because the Fed did X, Y, or Z. The reality is we don't know for sure any of this stuff. And so we put so much meaning into these stories that we have. And so the next time that you're triggered by something, it's when you're triggered, you're generally it's a threat to your image, your ego, your control, or your security. But what story are you attaching to that fact when you got angry? And really try to interrogate that fact and find out what's behind that. She also talks about the fact that remembering the past or anticipating the future is where the fear resides. In the present, generally we're fine, but it's thinking about something that happened to us, or it's thinking about something that we think may happen to us in the future. So I think that's important. Her biggest contribution to this world of self-improvement are the four questions in her sort of what she calls investigating and interrogating your thoughts and your beliefs. And it's not about necessarily dropping those thoughts or beliefs, but it's about softening them up going through this process. So basically, in her book, she has a million different examples where she has real verbatim sort of conversations with her clients and goes through everything from addiction to things like, oh, my parents are being or my kids are being reckless by traveling during COVID, things of that nature. So you can read through that and get a good perspective on how she answers those questions. So basically, you start with, is what your belief, is it true? Can you absolutely be certain that it's true? Would you bet your life on it? And you go through this, and then you say, okay, how do you feel when you believe this thought? And so generally, people will say, oh, I feel nervous, I feel scared, whatever. Well, how would you be or who would you be without that thought? And a lot of peace comes over them. And so we are choosing to suffer by believing these thoughts. And the next step is, after you go through these four questions, is the turnaround. How could the opposite be true, either for you or for the individual? I'm not going to go through specific examples because there's a bunch of them in the book, and you get more of it by reading it. But it's a pretty powerful tool, very simple but powerful. The next piece that I really enjoyed about her perspective is this notion of business. There's my business, there's yours business, and there's sort of God's or reality. And so we tend to spend a lot of time, at least some of us, in other people's business and telling people how they should live their life, or at least in our mind, telling ourselves how we think they should be living our life. So if we're constantly in someone else's business, then we're not in our own. And who's really living your life? Who's here right now in the present living your life? And so trying to be cognizant of that is, I think, super important. And you may realize that shit, you've been, focused on other people's life and you haven't been present at all on your own. So that could be a wake up call for you. The takeaway for me is the title of the book, Loving What Is, which is she says she's a great, lover of reality because when she argues with reality, she loses every time. And so I think it's really important to sort of realize that, or have a belief that things happen and that means they should have happened. And we're all here on Earth School, she says. So everything that happens here is for us to learn something from. It's not happening to us, but it's happening for us. Having that perspective is super powerful, in my opinion. Reality doesn't wait for your opinion or permission or your vote. It just does what it does. The more you can sort of embrace reality, that I think the happier you'll be and the less suffering. And do this work for, love of freedom, love of truth, If you just are committed to being right about your story, then great. Don't bother. Enjoy that. And if you have stories that cause you great or provide you with great happiness and joy, great, keep them. No need to get rid of them, but really look at the things that give you a lot of suffering and interrogate those. It's the uninvestigated stories that cause a lot of the suffering, in her opinion. So be a lover of reality. If you have any questions, you want to talk more about it, just reach out. Thanks.